All right, so buckle up, everybody, because this deep dive, we're going into the world of urban exploration, and it's gonna get spooky.
Oh, yeah.
Our source material today is this YouTube video, and it's called Three Scary True Urban Exploration Horror Stories from the channel Mr. Nightmare. Are you familiar with that one?
I am. Yeah,
The-
Mr. Nightmare. Yeah, he's got some really creepy stories.
Oh, yeah. So we're gonna hear three first-hand accounts from urban explorers, and their adventures took a terrifying turn.
It's so interesting, how these abandoned places, these like zones between the past and the present, how they just draw us in, even though there's like a good bit of fear there.
Yeah, it's like that saying curiosity killed the cat, but in this case, curiosity just might have scarred a few explorers for life.
Right.
The first story takes us to the scorching heat of Baker, California at this abandoned Royal Hawaiian motel. And our narrator, he's a seasoned urban explorer,
Okay.
and he decides to explore this place at night because, well, exploring in broad daylight in Baker would be like stepping into a furnace.
Yeah, that's a really good point. I mean, the extreme conditions just add another layer of risk to these ventures. It's not just about the unknown inside the structure, but the environment itself could be a threat.
Exactly. So he's navigating this motel, crumbling walls, shattered windows, just that unsettling silence that seems to amplify every little sound, and then he hears a voice. It's the kind of situation that would make your heart jump right out of your chest.
Oh, for sure. It's almost primal, isn't it?
Yeah.
That sudden awareness that someone else is there in a place you thought you were alone. It just triggers our deepest fears of the unknown.
So he decides to play it safe. He hides and waits. When everything seems quiet again, he continues exploring. Then a crash from above, something falls, and his curiosity gets the better of him.
The narrator is clearly battling with himself, right? The urge to explore versus just basic self-preservation. A lot of these stories have that tension.
He heads upstairs, flashlight beam dancing across the peeling paint and dust-covered floors, and that banging sound just gets louder and louder. He finally reaches the room and hears thump, thump, thump.
Oh, God. That kind of rhythmic sound in an abandoned building, it's like straight out of a horror novel.
He calls out, letting whoever is in there know that he's just an explorer. Then he peeks in, and what does he see?
What?
A woman standing in the shadows with a bloodied forehead and this strange substance smeared around her mouth.
Oh, my God. Talk about a nightmare.
Yeah, it's like a scene straight out of a nightmare.
That visual is so powerful because it taps into our fear of the uncanny, right? A human figure, but distorted in an unexpected context, is both familiar and unsettling.
He gets out of there fast. The woman starts screaming and chases him through the motel. He makes it back to his car, heart pounding like a drum solo, and calls his friend, another urban explorer named George.
Interesting. So he calls a fellow explorer before the authorities. That says a lot. There's this shared experience in this subculture, a kind of code of understanding.
Yeah. They wrestle with the decision of whether to call the police. It would mean admitting to trespassing, potentially facing legal consequences. But ultimately, the narrator does call the non-emergency line. He claims he overheard someone else mention the woman protecting himself while still trying to help. It's a tough call, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. It's a real ethical dilemma. You have this sense of responsibility to report a potentially dangerous situation, but then you also want to protect yourself and this whole community of urban explorers. It shows the complex relationship these people have with the law and the risks they're willing to take.
Okay, are you ready to jump into the next story?
Yeah, hit me.
This one takes us to Bryce Hospital, a former psychiatric facility. Now, the location isn't explicitly stated, but they hint that it's somewhere in Alabama. Our narrator and his cousins decide to embark on a late-night road trip to explore this notorious site.
Abandoned psychiatric hospitals, they hold a unique place in our imagination. They represent both the vulnerability of the human mind and like this often troubling history of mental health treatment. It's no wonder they're seen as particularly eerie.
Yeah, there's a real fascination with these places and a sense of mystery, too. So they arrive at this massive decaying building in the dead of night, vines clinging to the walls, the roof partially caved in, and right away they see pentagrams spray-painted all over the place.
Those pentagrams, regardless of their meaning, they just transform the space, right?
Mm-hmm.
Are they a warning, a symbol of the occult, or just an attempt to amplify the creepiness?
Yeah.
It raises questions about who else might be drawn to this place and what their intentions might be.
It definitely adds to the unsettling atmosphere. They explore the upper floors, even climb a rickety ladder to the roof, and it's from there that they spot a strange light off in the distance. They try calling out, but the light vanishes.
Oh, that vanishing light. It just plays on our fear of the unseen, the unknown, right? It's a classic part of ghost stories and folklore. It feeds into our desire to explain the unexplainable.
Their sense of unease keeps building as they decide to head down to the basement.
Uh-oh.
Basements, even in perfectly ordinary houses, they have a way of spooking people, but imagine a basement in an abandoned psychiatric hospital.
It's like a descent into the subconscious, into the darkest recesses of the human psyche.
They're down in the basement, catching their breath after navigating the crumbling stairs when they hear a voice coming from the back of the room. Now, I don't know about you, but that would be enough to send me running for the hills.
Oh, yeah, me too. That unexpected voice, it's such a good narrative device. It just shatters the illusion of solitude and introduces this new level of uncertainty. Who is this person, and why are they in this abandoned building?
One of the cousins shines his flashlight and they see a man squatting in the darkness. They cautiously approach, asking if he's okay, and then, well, things take a turn for the worse.
Oh no, what happens next? The guy just lets out this wild, almost inhuman scream and charges at them.
Oh my God.
They barely have time to react before they're scrambling for their lives, fleeing through the darkness, adrenaline pumping. They manage to escape through a broken window and find themselves in the woods surrounding the hospital. It's pure chaos.
That is terrifying. I can't even imagine that sheer panic of that moment. To go from curiosity to sheer terror in the blink of an eye, it must have been a complete sensory overload.
The source material describes how they ended up running in the wrong direction for almost an hour before they finally stumbled back to their car.
Oh, wow.
Just when they think they've escaped this nightmare, they hear rustling in the bushes nearby.
Oh.
A rock comes flying out, and guess who appears?
Oh no, don't tell me. It's the man from the basement. He didn't just give up, did he?
He's back, and he's armed with a glass bottle. He chases them all the way to the car, banging on the windows as they frantically try to get the engine started. It's like something out of a horror movie, a relentless pursuer who won't let go.
That ending sends chills down my spine. It makes you wonder about the man's motivations. Was he simply territorial, protecting his space in the abandoned hospital, or was there something more sinister at play?
It's hard to say for sure, and that's what makes these stories so compelling. We're left to fill in the blanks to imagine the backstory, the psychology of the individuals involved.
Yeah, it's a good reminder that the places we explore, even those seemingly deserted, still hold traces of human lives, human stories. And those stories can be beautiful, tragic, or in this case, downright terrifying. But you know what? I'm ready for the final story. Hit me with it. What kind of abandoned location are we exploring next?
This time we're heading to the countryside of Georgia. The narrator, who is just 15 years old at the time, accompanies his 18-year-old brother, Seb, to explore this huge abandoned house.
Okay, I'm already getting a sense of foreboding just from that description. A big, empty house in the middle of nowhere, 2 teenage boys exploring the unknown. What could possibly go wrong?
Well, before they even reach the house, they encounter a woman walking towards them on the long, overgrown concrete road leading up to the property.
Just imagining that scene is sending shivers down my spine. A lone woman on a deserted road leading to an abandoned house. It's like a scene straight out of a Gothic novel.
The narrator describes her as having this unsettling smile, almost too wide, too fixed. She walks with her hands clasped behind her back, which in any other context might seem harmless, but here it adds to the sense of unease.
It's like she's hiding something, holding something back. That image just screams, danger, danger. So what happens next? Do they try to talk to her?
They do, but the whole exchange is just bizarre. She comments on the lovely weather, and they try to make polite conversation, but there's this underlying feeling that something is just not right.
That feeling you get in the pit of your stomach that tells you to run, right? I've definitely been there. So they pick up the pace, trying to put some distance between themselves and the strange woman. What does she do?
She keeps pace with them, and as she gets closer, she utters this incredibly strange sentence. She says, "I have to go to bed now."
Hold on, what? I have to go to bed now. That is so out of context, so creepy. It's like she's not even acknowledging them as real people, just elements in her own strange little world.
It's exactly. It's both nonsensical and weirdly threatening. Yeah. They're completely freaked out by this point, so they basically start speed walking, almost running away from her. When they look back, she's vanished. Just like that. Gone.
Oof. Disappeared into thin air. That's the stuff nightmares are made of. It plays on that primal fear of the unknown, of things that defy explanation. So they finally make it to the abandoned house. What do they find inside?
Well, here's where things get even more interesting. They describe the house as being dilapidated on the outside, with ivy crawling up the walls and broken windows. Classic haunted house vibes. But when they step inside, they find that the house is fully furnished.
What?
There are decorations, personal belongings, even food in the fridge, although it's clearly rotten.
That's such a chilling detail. It's like the occupants just vanished, left in a hurry, as if something forced them to flee. It adds another layer of mystery to the story and makes you wonder about the history of the house, the lives that were lived there.
It's like stepping into a time capsule, a snapshot of a life interrupted. It raises so many questions. Where did they go? What happened? It's that sense of unfinished business that fuels our fascination with abandoned places.
So they're exploring this strangely preserved time capsule of a house. What happens next?
To check out the basement, which is also fully furnished but in a much more chaotic state,
Okay.
they hear a noise from upstairs and freeze hearts pounding in their chests. But then silence. Just the creaking of the old house settling.
Ugh, I hate that.
That's a classic horror movie trope. That false scare, but it effectively ratchets up the tension.
Yeah, those moments of silence, the anticipation, are sometimes the scariest pulse of these stories. It's like waiting for the other shoe to drop. So do they continue exploring?
They head back upstairs, drawn further into the mystery of the house. They eventually find themselves in a short hallway. The narrator's brother goes into one of the bedrooms and suddenly he calls out his brother's name in this panicked voice. The narrator rushes down the hallway and that's when he sees her.
Oh no. You mean the woman from the road? She's back. I knew it. She just had that air of menace about her, that feeling that she wasn't done with them yet.
She's standing at the end of the hall, still smiling, that unnerving smile. And then she asks this chilling question. Do you want to see what's behind my back?
That line is pure nightmare fuel. What is she hiding? A weapon. Something grotesque. It's that open-ended threat that leaves you completely paralyzed with fear. What happens next?
The narrator's brother screams, pushes him towards the stairs, and they both bolt out of the house as fast as their legs can carry them. They don't stop running until they're back at the Carhartts, racing adrenaline coursing through their veins. It's a classic fight-or-flight response kicking in.
That must have been terrifying. The build-up, the sudden reappearance of the woman, the cryptic question. It's a masterclass in suspense. And to leave it unanswered, to not reveal what's behind her back, it's just brilliant storytelling. It leaves you with this lingering sense of dread, a question that will haunt you long after the story is over.
It also speaks to the power of suggestion. Sometimes what we don't see is far more frightening than what we do.
So 3 stories, 3 terrifying encounters with the unknown. It really makes you think, doesn't it? About the risks we take, the boundaries we push, and the things that lurk in the shadows, both real and imagined. But before we wrap things up, I have to ask, what are your final thoughts on these stories? What struck you the most? I think what strikes me most is how these stories blur the line between the real and the imagined. We have these tangible, decaying structures, the abandoned places that exist in the physical world, but they also serve as canvases for our deepest fears and anxieties.
It's like these abandoned spaces become a mirror to our own psyches. Reflecting back our anxieties about the unknown, about the fragility of civilization, about what happens when the order we impose on the world crumbles away.
And it's interesting how each of these stories features an unexpected human encounter, a reminder that these spaces, while abandoned in the traditional sense, aren't always truly empty.
Yeah, that unexpected human element adds a whole other layer of complexity and unease. It reminds us that the boundaries between safety and danger, sanity and madness can be surprisingly porous.
The woman at the Royal Hawaiian Motel, van in the basement of Bryce Hospital, the smiling woman in Georgia, they all challenge our expectations of what we might find in these abandoned places.
Yeah.
It's not just about ghosts and supernatural phenomena, it's about the very real human darkness that can exist in these liminal spaces.
And I think that's what makes these stories so captivating and unsettling.
Uh.
They tap into our primal fears of the unknown, but they also force us to confront the shadows within ourselves, the parts of us that are drawn to the darkness, to the mysteries that lie beyond the edges of our comfort zones.
So for anyone listening who's ever felt that pull toward the abandoned and forgotten, who's ever been tempted to explore the crumbling ruins of the past, what advice would you give them?
I would say explore with caution, but explore nonetheless. These spaces have stories to tell, secrets to reveal, but always be mindful of the risks, both physical and psychological. And remember, sometimes the most unsettling discoveries are not the ones we find in the shadows, but the ones we find within ourselves.
That's a great way to put it. It's about respecting the power of these places and acknowledging that the line between curiosity and obsession, between adventure and danger, can be incredibly thin. And sometimes the greatest mystery is not what we find in the darkness, but what the darkness reveals about ourselves. Well, on that note, I think we've reached the end of our deep dive. Thanks for joining us on this exploration of the unsettling world of urban exploration gone wrong. Until next time, keep exploring, keep questioning, and keep those flashlights charged.
And remember, sometimes the most profound discoveries are the ones we least expect.